Hey everybody, we're going to be cleaning a Badger airbrush today. This is the Chrome Renegade from Badger Airbrush, and it's one I use all the time, and I abuse it. I've dropped it, I've kicked it, I've stepped on it, I've done everything to it. So I haven't rebuilt it in a while, and the needle is sticking on it. Everything is not spraying the way it should, the way I want it to spray. So what we're going to do is tear it apart, completely restore it inside, get it completely clean, and put it all back together for you guys. So hang out for a while. We're going to go through some of the problems and some of the benefits of keeping a super clean airbrush. So hang out with us today. Thanks. All right, welcome to the workbench. So this is the Chrome. We have our new needle and nozzle. Right here. This is a fine conversion kit for the Renegade Chrome. I always use the fine or ultra fine. So it's just a matter of opinion or preference. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start out by pulling the air valve out. Now sometimes this is in there pretty tight. This came loose. Now you always want to do this when you're soaking your airbrush. The reason why is because there's a little tiny O-ring in here that if any acetone gets into, it will ruin it. And then sometimes it's easier just to replace the whole air valve compared to trying to get that O-ring and replacing it, because there's a micro spring in here. It's all under tension, so it makes a fun evening. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to drop a little bit of oil on here. Work it in. You don't want too much, but you just want a little bit. We'll work that in a little bit. Now the way to check your air valve is by hooking air up to it and then pressing in, and you'll hear air coming out of this little tiny air port here. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we're going to hook the air hose up to this. And then we could use the air cap, that'll work. And just press that in. And you'll see that the air valve is working properly. Okay, so now that we know that that works good, we can set this aside. And now we can start pulling apart the rest of the airbrush. Most airbrushes are the same. They're all going to have a backing. They're going to have a needle lock nut. They're going to have some type of spring assembly in here, putting pressure with the needle pushing forward. It's going to have a trigger, and it's going to have a head cap, nozzle, and air cap. Some type of color cup and some type of cap on top. Okay, so what we're going to do first is go ahead and take off the backing. That'll expose the needle. The needle lock nut comes off, and then we can pull the airbrush needle out. Now sometimes it gets stuck in here. Like right here I can feel it's rough, so the packing has paint in it, or the needle has paint on it. If it's too hard to pull out, then go ahead and drop some acetone in here, let it sit for a little bit, and then spin the needle until you break it loose. What'll happen is, if you don't pull the needle out every time you clean your airbrush, you'll get a little bit of paint buildup, which I could see on this, a little bit of paint buildup on it, and that'll make it hard for the needle to come through the packing on it. But you don't want to rip it out, because if you do, you can hurt the packing inside the airbrush. And on some of these airbrushes, the packing is set up by the company themselves, so it's not replaceable. You just send in the body, they put in a new one, and they send it back to you. Sometimes if you send in the whole airbrush, they'll rebuild the whole airbrush for you and send it back to you. Okay, so we got the lock nut loose, the needle comes out, set the needle aside. And then we can pull off that lock nut. Now there's a set here. I'm going to pull the trigger out because that's going to fall out. Same with the trigger mechanism on this airbrush. On some airbrushes, it's all one piece with this part here. So that would just all pull out as one assembly. So now on this airbrush, it has two different settings on it. This is to micromanage your spring on the pullback. That adds more tension. Backing it off takes away tension on the spring. And then we're going to pull this part out here. Sometimes if it locks up, just pull the center part out and then just back out that nut. And there you have it. So now on this one, this part can come out, which will expose the spring that's inside here. So if you want to get into the spring, I think it comes out this way on this airbrush. Okay. So the spring comes out this way. So now that is this part completely pulled apart. But because there's no reason to clean in here, I will soak it, but I'll put this back together so that way we don't lose any parts. But you can, now, what we will do afterwards is we'll pull this apart, throw a little bit of lube in there, and put it all back together. So that way this moves real smooth. Alright, so now we have the trigger out, the air valve out, and the needle out, and the whole entire back of the airbrush. Now we have to pull apart the front of the airbrush. This is where a lot of people go in and use pliers on, which sometimes you have to. If it's tight and there's paint buildup on it, it's not going to come apart easy. So I'm going to show you a way to pull off the air cap, because I bet you it's tight, with a pair of pliers without hurting the airbrush. So the air cap is loose on this one, so I will pull that off, set that aside. Now this is a nozzle. You want to be very careful of that nozzle. It's made out of brass, some are stainless, but you want to be very careful of it not to damage it in any way, because any type of hit, pinch, or anything done to it, it's going to damage it. So what we can do is let's go ahead and put this back on to protect it. Alright, so now this is tight. So I'm going to grab my pliers over here. Now if I just hook this onto here and move it, it's going to hurt. It could hurt the chrome. Now remember, these are all brass parts that are chrome plated. So you don't want to go in there and just grab and start twisting, because you're really going to hurt it. I'm sure you've seen a whole bunch of airbrushes that are scratched. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take a paper towel, take a pair of pliers, go over the paper towel, lightly press down. Now I could feel where the knurled part is and the body is. You don't want to be on the body because you'll scratch the body and not loosen anything. So now what I do is I hold the pliers solid and then I twist the airbrush. And just slowly twist it once it loosens up. This one wasn't that tight, but it'll show you how to pull it apart. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and pull the air cap part off. Set it down. Now this is the part we need to be very careful of. This holds on the nozzle. This is what adds pressure to the nozzle to push into the body of the airbrush. So right now there's nothing holding that nozzle in, except for pressure. So I just pulled out that nozzle. Nozzle sits in there, and it's designed. This is a beveled edge. This is a beveled edge, and the two go together, and the bevel is what makes the seal. This acts like a compression nut And as you tighten that on, it compresses down on that nozzle to make the seal to the body. This seal is where you have problems when your airbrush is backfeeding. When you're spraying, it's not coming out, paint won't come out, and sometimes it'll bubble up into the cup. Now the drawback is these sometimes, I think these are brass on the Badger, which makes them non-magnetic. The Iwatas are stainless steel and they're non-magnetic also. So if you drop it, you have to find it. You can't just take a magnet and find it that way. So what I do is I take a little jar of acetone. As soon as I get that nozzle off, it goes into the acetone. Now that's protected. We can put this on it. So that way if I do what I just did to the oil, we won't lose it. Now that's soaking in the acetone, so the whole time that I'm doing the body, this will be soaking in the acetone. So that is it with tearing apart the airbrush. So now we have to clean everywhere. Now there's paint that builds up back up against the backing, and there's paint that builds up against the front of the airbrush that there's no way to really get into without using an ultrasonic cleaner. So that's what we're going to do. So I will set up the ultrasonic cleaner and get you back to this. We'll see you guys in a little bit. Alright, so I have a cup here with some acetone in it. We're going to take the body and put it in it. I like using a plastic cup. This is a paint mixing cup. This is the air valve, don't put that in there. Trigger. The back assembly, to make sure that doesn't fall apart, go ahead and put the needle lock nut on. You don't have to soak this, I just do. This, now on this, sometimes there's, on the chrome, there's O-rings in here. Yeah, there's an O-ring in here. So with that O-ring in here, let's grab an old needle. We could use tweezers. Then we'll take the tweezers and kind of run it around to get that to come out of the groove that it's in. And now we'll walk this out of the groove. Set that aside. Now there's nothing on here that'll get hurt, so we can put this back together. You really don't need to soak this part. This one's really clean. A lot of mine have overspray from shooting clear next to them. So that didn't sit down in the acetone, so let's go ahead and thread that in a little more, and we're good. All right. The trigger, nozzle, and the needle with the nozzle hold down. And that's all our parts, right? Except for the little nozzle that's in here. Now we can't take this, put that in there. Well, it's not. Okay, so now in the ultrasonic cleaner, I have water in here. The reason why I don't put acetone directly in here is because it gets very hot and it can explode, just in case. I'm going to sit that in there. Now this kind of floats. So the trick that I found was taking a nice beer mug, drop it on top, and that holds it all down. Now this, we could set this inside here. We're going to set it for 4, and now my editor told me not to play this because it's very loud and annoying. So just for him. Alright, so that's the ultrasonic, that's the noise it makes. We're going to cut this part out and make it to where you guys don't have to go through that painful experience. So, editor, cut out the sound. We did soak this overnight, ran it. Ultrasonic cleaned it for a while, and now we're basically done with the machine. So let's get that out of the way. All right. Now we get to rebuild the airbrush. Okay, so to check the needle, right now it's still dirty. So let's go ahead and take a little bit of acetone. The way I clean the needle is I will take it, pinch it, and then draw the needle through my fingers. And I'll do this a couple times. Until it basically comes clean. There's nothing leaving behind. Okay, now to check to see if there's a bend in it, you can take it on a paper towel and draw it across the paper towel. If it has a little tiny bend on it, you'd feel a snag on the paper towel. I feel nothing, so we're good. Alright, so let's get some parts here. Start with this. I left an O-ring on here. You didn't see it. So here's an example of what it can do to your air valve. The O-ring is bigger than the threads now. So now the O-ring won't stay on. Very kind of pliable. Sometimes as it dries up, it'll shrink back to regular size. But this O-ring is not that important anyways. Just kind of makes it when you put it on the backing of the airbrush, it just makes a nice soft feel to the threads. So, alright, here's the body. Now this was really dirty when we started, so we're going to have some cleaning to do. For the most part, the outside, the chrome came really clean. Inside the body is fairly clean. We'll grab some Q-tips and see how bad it really is. It's still pretty bad. So it's going to take a little bit of scrubbing to get it completely clean. We'll do this until the Q-tips are clean. Let's see how we are. Let's grab some new Q-tips. These are the cool ones to use, the precision tip ones. Because they have a nice point on them. Now I'm not using completely clean acetone, which I'll switch over to, but as dirty as it is, I feel like we got a lot of cleaning to do before we're to the point of worrying about how clean the acetone is. So it's not as bad as I thought it would be in there. I know a lot of companies sell brushes to go in there and clean it all out. Talking to the manufacturer, I was told never put anything metal through there other than the needle itself, because anything metal can cause problems. If you scratch it, there's threaded surfaces in there, there's a packing in there. Lock the lid on that. Now this is clean acetone. That's pretty clean. That's pretty good. Not too bad either. Cleaning where the needle seat goes, or the nozzle seat. The nozzle goes right up against that body there. There shouldn't be any paint in here. That's the air surfaces. This is where the air comes through. This turned out pretty clean so far. I think I'm going to call this good enough. But what I like to do is take the needle. On this airbrush I can do this because the needle doesn't step down. I run it backwards through the airbrush. Push out any dirt, debris that might be in there, in the packing. Feels pretty good. Alright, so that's the body. Now we'll get into some of the parts. This looks pretty good. Sometimes there's a little bit of paint build up inside the knurling of the back of the airbrush. The acetone, put the O-ring on. Now this thread's in there. I'll put a little bit of lubricant on the O-ring, a little bit on the threads. Doesn't hurt. Won't hurt anything. The O-ring just kind of makes it to where wherever you put this, it stays. Adds resistance on the threads. Yeah, that looks clean. Right now I don't have any used needles, but you could take a used needle and put it through here just to see if there's any paint inside there. There shouldn't be, but you never know, especially with me. Trigger looks good. Sometimes this is ribbed, and sometimes you'll get paint inside those ribs. This looks pretty good. This looks pretty good. Just making sure the threads are clean. I could go ahead and just put a little brush on those threads. I don't see any paint on them, but it doesn't hurt to be thorough. Looks good. This is the spring assembly. So this will drop a little bit of a spray gun lube in there. There's some there. That's keyed. There's a flat spot on this. There's a flat spot in here. You turn it to a certain section. You get it into the keyed area. You can work that lube in. This little nut. And that little trigger assembly. And that's the cone. Alright. So you can kind of see what we got out of that airbrush. Doesn't look clean. So, alright. Make sure this is all clean. That's good. Head assembly. The head assembly is that. This is the air cap. And every manufacturer kind of has their own terminology for it. I've always been one to, I know what to use, I know how to fix it, I don't know what it's called all the time. Okay, that's good. That's good, that's good, that's good, good. Alright. Okay, so that threads onto there. That's on that. Alright. So now we can put the air valve on. Alright, I found my air valve. So I had it in my hose last night. I was checking it to make sure it was working. So that's how you check to make sure it works. So that's where that was. Alright, so we're going to take the air valve. I lubed it already, but I'll do another drop of lube. My bottle's all cracked, so I got lube right there. Okay. Now, I don't have to, but I'll put a little bit of wax on here. Just so it seals it up. Doesn't take much. And doesn't even need it really, but one of those things that can't hurt. Alright. Now the air valve's done. Now we can take the trigger and put the lube right here. And I just lube up the bottom and kind of the side of the trigger, because the side of the trigger kind of slides on the body sometimes. So it can't hurt to put a little bit of lube. We don't want to put that part in yet. We put this part in. So this part has two surfaces that get ridden on. That surface and that surface. That goes in. That goes into where the arch is facing the trigger. On this airbrush. On some airbrushes it's different. And then we tilt it forward. And then this part goes in. So what I'm doing is, as I'm threading this in, it wants to lock up on how this is keyed. So I try to make sure that that has movement as I'm threading it in. and I thread it in all the way to where it stops. If that's too much spring for you, you could back it off, but I like having the full spring on it. And then remember, I was talking about this being two pieces. You could back this off a little bit for a little softer spring, and that changes the spring pressure without changing the distance that the trigger can move. So I'll thread that all the way in just because after a while you get used to a certain pull, and that's what you want. Alright, so now we have the front of the airbrush to contend with. Clean off my fingers. My nozzle's in here still, hopefully. It's so small. I gotta put on my glasses for this one. Alright. So now my tweezers. Alright, so that's the nozzle. Let's put the cap back on because I will knock it over and spill it. Alright, so that's how small the nozzle is. Little tiny nozzle on these things. So what I have to do is look at it and see if there's any paint inside of it. No, looks nice and clean. What I can do is take the needle, just lightly slide it in there, make sure no paint comes out. It's looking pretty good. Alright. So now we'll take this. Remember, the needle holds in the trigger, so you want to make sure that you're holding the trigger. Run it through the airbrush. I could do it this way. Now, some airbrushes you would have to feed it the other way. You'd have to feed it from the back side through. Okay, so now I'm going to push this forward. Take a little bit of wax, holding the nozzle up against the needle. I'm going to put some wax on this needle. Put some wax on this nozzle. And that's what's going to be the seal for it. And this wax is toilet bowl wax. It's a wax ring for sealing a toilet to the floor. So now we have the wax there. Now I can pull the needle back and then pinch the nozzle, push it up against the body, and then rotate it to make sure that it's sealed. So what that does is that takes the wax and rotates it around the whole entire body and makes sure that it's all the way around. Then we take our nozzle lock nut, head assembly, I've heard it called a whole bunch of things. Let's put a little bit of a, being very careful not to drop that, put a little bit of wax on this. That way we don't get any air coming out of that area. Think is wax is kind of like a thread sealant. Okay, now we put that on. That gets finger tight. I'll put a little wax on the front of this. This one you don't need wax on it really because not much air passes through it, but Some people freak out if they see bubbles coming out of this, so just a little bit of wax will get rid of that bubble. And when you thread this on, I always go backwards first. You'll feel a little kind of a drop, and then when you feel that kind of thread drop, then you know you're threading on properly, not cross-threading it. All these threads should be real easy to work with. Alright, so now that's tight, that's tight, that's tight, air valve's tight, that's tight. Okay, now we're going to set the needle. So what I'm going to do is push the needle. Oh, we got to lube it first, right? We haven't done that. So I pulled it all the way out. You don't have to. So what I'll do is just get some of the oil that's up here. Now this oil is spray gun lube. It's designed for urethane painting and stuff like that. You want to use a spray gun lube. It's better than 3-in-1 oil or anything like that. That can cause fish eyes and a whole bunch of other problems. Okay, so now the needle, I can feel it hit the packing and kind of slide on that packing in there. So I want to lube that packing. That's one of the main reasons why we lube the needle. We're going to do that. Got a little extra lube on the back here that didn't go into the brush, so I'll just clean that off. It does nothing up here. Push that in there. Okay, so now what I do is lightly press the needle up against the nozzle and rotate it a little bit, then tighten it up. Now when you pull back on the trigger, you should feel a little tiny stick the first time you do it. It should have just a little dink, and then that means you're pushed up against the nozzle tight and you're ready to go. Now we can throw the backing on. And this airbrush is ready for service. Wipe off any oil that I got on it, any wax that I got on it. Alright, well that's it. That's how you clean and put back together, tear apart and put back together a Badger Chrome Renegade. So thank you very much for watching. Come check out some more videos. As you can tell, we went pretty far with this one. So we're going to be cleaning out some other airbrushes, different makes and models, and restoring them. Some of these have bent needles, some have nozzles, some of these have spray problems that skipping or just all different type of stuff that can happen while you're airbrushing. So please like, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell. That way it notifies you when I'm doing projects like this. And if you guys have any questions, please leave it in the comments. Anything I didn't do or did do, any type of feedback is awesome. Ideas, camera angles, different airbrushes to clean out, different things to do with an airbrush. Anything you guys want to learn, that's what we're here for. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.